if you see a problem, look for a way to fix it. If you see someone who has a need and you have an opportunity to kind of help them or uniquely find a way to support them, do it. Our world needs to be a connected space where we care for each other and we look out for each other. And some of us make a pathway for others to follow. They'll make the pathway bigger, they'll make it better. But some of us have to go through the woods and maybe take a few brambles, but it's okay because when you look back, you will be amazed at what is coming after.
Hi, I'm Nora Jones. Welcome to It's About Language. This podcast connects language and culture to life, learning, and hope. You'll experience insightful conversations with creative leaders in the fields of education, business, arts, and science. My guests shed light on the impact of language and culture on individuals and society as they share their stories and experiences. You'll be informed and inspired as we explore how language and culture make us human and bring hope in the midst of a challenging world. All right, it is my great pleasure, a joy, to welcome my friend and a phenomenal woman, Linda Egnatz, here today for this podcast. Linda, welcome.
Thank you.
All right. Well, you, Linda, are changing the world. You have been a National Teacher of the Year in World Languages. You have made a change in languages as an educator. You have a cultural interaction background that has affected even your family. And on top of all of that, now you've opened a brand new pathway to global impact with the Global Seal of Biliteracy. That's quite a mission that you've been on in your life. Can you talk a little bit about that? You were talking about being uniquely qualified for missions. What is that like?
Well, I think that for me, it has always been probably at the base level about the people that I'm around. And when, as a teacher, when you see students that are talented and gifted in languages, and yet they might leave the classroom because they don't have anywhere else to go or nothing else to strive for, that became a little bit of an issue. But it also was an issue for students who would just sort of do what they needed to do to get by, that sort of proverbial question of like, what do I have to do to get an A? And it was always looking for minimums. And I'm kind of a looking for maximum sort of person. And I wanted to figure out what would it take to create those opportunities for students to look for maximums. So I think one of the things that struck me when I first read about the State Seal of Biliteracy way back in 2012, November, was that this would be that piece that students would be excited about, that they could be motivated to sort of take control over their own journey, that it would motivate them to go above and beyond what was required for a particular course description and actually achieve something for themselves that they could leverage later, whether it was at the university level or in the workforce. And that has been sort of my ongoing mission. And just to expand that, it worked in my classroom. I saw it working in schools across the state of Illinois. I saw it begin to work in other schools in other states as new states adopted their own state seal programs. But I also saw all of those who were not being included in that equation. And it's too big of an opportunity to miss. And for me, the support of the state seals has been incredibly important because it's the very first time, I think, in our history where being bilingual was deemed by a state government entity as valuable. And we have to claim that, and we have to tout that, and we have to celebrate. And more importantly, we have to take advantage of that opportunity to raise the visibility of bilinguals and the value that those assets bring to us, both to our communities, to whether it's in a hospital, or it's in social work, or it's just in the humanness of sharing that experience with someone else of another culture and becoming friends. And that whole piece with the state seals was really important, but it's an optional program. It's not mandated. So there are a number of schools that don't participate, but it also meant that we had an opportunity to make something bigger. And there were so many students that were had language skills that didn't know how to access that program. And there are so many of us, even as educators, who don't know what our own skill level is. I'm old enough, really old enough, to go back to a time when teachers were hired to teach language because they had a minor. Um, there were no OPIs or required language proficiency guidelines to teach in a they if they thought that you could teach it, they just threw you in the classroom. And I think a lot of teachers, especially if we've been teaching lower levels and providing that simpler, comprehensible input for our learners, which is important to do, that maybe we don't have a grasp on our own level of skill. And so that's another piece that I think became really important was that too many times language learners are left off at a spot and don't see language learning as this ongoing journey. But language and culture are both dynamic and they change. And I think it's important that we recognize that and as even as educators become role models to ongoing language learning.
Wow, so much richness in there. So, for folks that are not as familiar with seals, be it state seals of biliteracy or the global seal that you're working on, there are a couple of directions I'd like to go. First is, again, why is it so important that one might look to receiving such a seal? What is the key about getting the seal? And why is it that states, most of the states in the United States now, have decided that this could be a worthy item, at least as an option?
Well, I think it's important because, first of all, we are a multilingual country. Uh, many there are. I just read a fact yesterday that there were 3 million homes or 3 million individuals that speak Chinese at home in the United States. There are a number of heritage languages that are being spoken here, but also some of them that are being lost. And so just the idea of language learning is important. But we have now 40 states that recognize that language assets and being bilingual is an important skill to have. Unfortunately, in most high schools, there might only be 3 or 4 languages offered. And so the Seal of Biliteracy became a way to provide recognition as well as an incentive to maintain a heritage language, a home language, as well as to provide a way to give validity to that language skill that an individual has. I remember a mom of a Polish student saying that when she took her son to be enrolled at high school, that he was told he was going to have to take a language credit to graduate. And he said, "Well, I already have a language. I speak Polish." And the counselor said, "Well, that doesn't count."
Ow.
And how heartbroken the parent was and how more heart-wrenching that became as he decided he just didn't want to take Polish lessons anymore because they didn't count. And so we think about how do we create that opportunity? And that's one of the ways that the state seal has validity. So it can provide a competency based credit for language for a high school student, especially for many of our English language learners across the country, that especially if they come late, they may spend additional time in English support classrooms and not have time to take one of those standard world language classrooms. And not having access to a world language credit would mean that they may also be restricted from entering a 4-year college program that has that requirement. So it's an access issue to begin with. It's also a recognition piece and a support piece to encourage the sustaining ongoing maintenance of home languages. A lot of our research and data says that as an immigrant comes to the United States, that by that third generation, that home language is lost. And that's a natal gift we wanna support and
Mhm.
celebrate, and I think that that's one of the roles that the Seal of Biliteracy plays. The second role it could play is just providing and leveraging opportunities for, universities to provide appropriate, college placement.
Mm.
We know universities that provide advanced placement, oftentimes, can, increase their majors and minors, which is an important issue, but also to provide opportunities for employers to identify who in the workforce has validated language skills.
You know, Linda, there are so many aspects here that you're talking about empowerment, and you have a story of something that was disempowering the young man with his Polish language skills. You have personal stories of empowering uh, folks that you have worked with that are now members of your family, for example, or members of your professional circle, and stories that you are now reaping from opening up the seals of biliteracy beyond school systems, beyond the state to these heritage language. What are some of the stories that come to mind about empowering languages and cultures within your own life and those that now you're seeing out in the world?
Wow, I think that's kind of how I live, so picking out 1 or 2,
Mhm.
so many wonderful faces come to mind, and they have impacted me as much as maybe I have impacted or opened any doors for them. One example has to be our daughter. We have an adopted daughter from who we adopted at, age 10 from Guatemala. She is a bilateral amputee. She lost, both of her arms as a young child, and she, came to us actually as a Shriners Hospital kid. We were a foster family for her as she, got prosthetic arms so that she would be able to do the things that kids regularly do, read and write and tie their shoes. As an adult, she's going to be, 40 this year. She, does no long she no longer uses her prosthetics, but she has worked in the Indianapolis public school districts as a bilingual aide and empowers children who, like her, have come to the United States and had to learn a language as an older child and adopt new cultures and new school systems, and seeing what she was able to do, and she did it more on her own than I supported her, I'm sure, but to see her then enable other students and children to do the same has been, remarkable. So I would
Um,
say she would certainly be one story, and I think of all of the students as a language teacher, I had the unique opportunity to to travel as a Spanish teacher with, students abroad, and I chose intentionally to go to countries, back and forth. I did Spain, but I also did many countries in Latin America so that students wouldn't get a stereotype of what is a Spanish speaker.
aha.
And, one of those young ladies who actually went 3 years on, tours with me, is now at the University of Florida, and she has now, I believe, worked in 4 or 5 different NGOs in 4 or 5 different countries,
Wow.
including, Spain and, Venezuela and Uruguay, and she's at the University of Florida now, who is, they are studying actually remotely, because of COVID. And so she decided, well, if I have to be remote, I don't have to be in Florida. So she's currently in the Dominican Republic working with an NGO on her time when she's not in class. And what an amazing story. And she just said, the world is an open place we can serve. And I didn't tell her that. But I think when you open the door to a bigger place, and we do that through language, we do that through culture, and we do that through just exposing someone to a new experience. You just don't ever know where that's going to go and how many other lives will be impacted because we took that step. Language is so much more than grammar and vocabulary.
Oh, it's humanity on the hoof, isn't it, my friend?
Definitely.
One of the things that you and I have talked about a lot and that has always impressed me about your work is that you dream bigger than anybody that I have ever known. You start where you are and then you dream big and then you move into that vision and you start taking steps there. Strikes me that the global seal among those things, their education in general, but I hear I'm going to focus on that seal, are ways of moving others to that vision that that young woman had, to taking the steps in it. And is that part of your vision? Is that part of the mission? How does it relate to what you're doing with Global Seal and other things?
Well, I think global seals certainly born from the state seals, which is again something we all need to support, we need to celebrate and participate in as a program where we can, because it is the government which is oftentimes not valued language, saying language is really important and it is a part of all of us. So I think that's a huge piece. But it does but it's not big enough. So you're
Uh-huh.
right. I like to dream big, and oftentimes the state seal typically is an award that is provided to a high school senior at graduation, and that's exciting and that's important to do. But I want to take that trophy and turn it into a tool. And oftentimes that tool isn't being given to the person at the either who needs it or at the time that they need it. So for example, our university students are left out of that equation at a point when they're looking into the workforce where there are language pay differentials available if they have a skill or opportunities to work in a company that otherwise could hire someone from another country who's already carrying language skills. And the workforce is competitive for these young adults graduating for college, and everything we can do to provide them with that additional certification is important. One of the things we did by design with the Global Seal is we chose to create a serial numbered certificate to treat it not like an award, but truly like a certification of a skill because that's how it's earned. It's earned through external testing that validates your language skills in reading, writing, listening, and speaking. And it goes in as a language credential, as a certification, right in on under skills and certifications on LinkedIn. It should be added to a resume. We should all be adding our language skills regularly to highlight that that is something that is as valuable as knowing how to do some kind of other item you might be credentialed for, whether it's plumbing or computer programming. It is a skill. And our students need to know how to take that skill, whether they learned it in a classroom or at home or in a study abroad experience, or they taught themselves as a polyglot online. They need to know how to take that skill and leverage it. And that's sort of what's been missing. So we're telling students as educators that there are all these opportunities if you to use language, and we read studies like the one that was lead with languages and the Ipsos studies put out last summer that said there are all these companies that have lost business because they couldn't find bilinguals or couldn't
Mm.
expand because there weren't enough bilingual people in the workforce to meet their need. And there's this hole in the middle where they don't know how to connect. And so the Global Seal is that tool to connect. And we're providing the certification to provide evidence to the employer or to the university that their skill exists. We're providing essentially a linguistic database or rich resource of a workforce. And there are thousands of students across the country with a high school state seal of biliteracy. We have thousands of high school, university, and even adults now with a global seal of biliteracy, and they are there for the taking, but people don't know they exist. And that's sort of my goal, to make that noise as loud as I can. And so one of the things we're doing with Global Seal is to create a language learning event around that problem. Again, I like to look for solutions, and to me, that's a problem that needs to be solved. How do we create that sort of pipeline, that conduit between language learners and everyone that wants to know where those language learners are?
Uh-huh. So what are the ways that you're getting the message out? What are some of those directions to bridge that gap between what you have and what people know about it?
Well, the first thing is we're working with schools to create those language pathways. The Global Seal, unlike the State Seal, which is awarded as a high school senior award, can be awarded as soon as someone meets the language criteria. It is truly just a language skill certification. And so schools are using that as a benchmark, sort of a pathway of certifications or awards. And so students who reach one of the Global Seal has a three-tiered pathway of language certifications: a functional fluency, and then working fluency, and then finally our upper tier at professional fluency. So it allows the learner to realize that there's more places to go with language. It's not a one and done. Congratulations, you don't need to know anymore. You're bilingual, but rather that language is this ongoing journey. And it provides schools with additional support tools to create that pathway to continue pushing students at the upper levels and encouraging those that have acquired language early, maybe because of a home experience or a dual language or immersion program, to get certified now and then continue and level up. And that idea of gamifying language learning is just an
Ah.
exciting concept for me. So that's the first piece. The second piece is to work with universities as they are adopting language certifications as a micro credential alongside of other career area and field specialties. Most of us are not taking a language to become a language teacher, although that is an incredible opportunity. I miss the classroom so much. But I would say that as a language educator, one of my goals was to help my students realize that they could use their language alongside of whatever career pathway and passion they chose to pursue.
Mhm.
And at the university level, that's exactly what we need to be able to do, is to help. And the language certification through external testing is one way to do that. Whether we add in competency based testing, test like credit by exam, dual credit, we provide students with an opportunity to demonstrate language skill and not necessarily have to have the major or the minor to do that. When a person applies to a job, it's unlikely that the HR person looking over their resume is going class by class through their transcript.
Yeah.
And so, if they don't have a major or a minor, how do they highlight their language skill? How do they articulate that in a way that says, yes, you have evidence? And it's amazing that even though someone could have a conversation with you, oftentimes it is a piece of paper that creates evidence. And for our English language learners, that's even more vital.
Tell that why. Why for English language learners even more vital? Go to that part.
Because I see oftentimes someone demean a person's English language skills because the English is spoken with an accent. And my husband now will share with someone, well, that means they speak one more language than you do. But I think the
Mm.
problem becomes that someone doesn't have confidence that someone with an accent could communicate with a student, with a parent, with a customer, with a colleague. And so having that piece of paper becomes an empowerment tool. It is an articulation that, yes, I have not just language bilingual skills, but I am biliterate. I can read and write in the language as well. And I probably have more than, you have as a monolingual English speaker who, may have
Mhm.
a Southern accent, for goodness sakes.
Yeah, exactly. I'm thinking about the accenting right within the cultures that we have, indeed.
That's right.
Linda, tell me, what has the response been from businesses, government agencies, NGOs, and so forth to this credentialing, this external testing, this ongoing registration?
Well, I think one of the things that's really important is they're looking for a way that's simple to to certify or to alleviate them of the responsibility of testing and providing um, training or something like that to make sure that the person is able to speak the language. So that's one issue. An individual can come sort of ready-made with their language certification. The second piece has been really to inform employers about language skills. That just like we've been working with educators and learners to talk about the different levels of proficiency, to help employers understand that they may not need someone who is a professionally fluent to be a receptionist, that it may be sufficient for them as a receptionist or a store clerk to have functional fluency. They can handle those repetitive tasks. They can give someone some simple instructions. They can help them fill out the mortgage form or the social worker form or something like that that's required, and have a lower level of language than is someone who might have to handle extensive language and in-depth conversations. And I think that's also been a great role that we have been able to play in to enable them to understand that some language may be all you need. You
Uh-huh.
may, but then that there are also, times where maybe you need more. And then here's the certification to prove that the person actually has the capability to do the more that you require.
No, the ability to know that there are different levels of, say, language expertise that can be accepted, and the certification helps to show that. I'm thinking of a workplace poster that has been developed by Actful and so forth. I'm assuming that that is a helpful resource here too.
Yeah, that poster, the oral proficiency in the workplace is really helpful for learners as well as I would suppose for employers, because learners can say, "Wow, if I take 2 years of that typical high school language course, I won't really have enough skill to do any jobs at all because there aren't
Mhm.
any in that frame yet." And so if they see themselves as a medical professional who wants to perhaps use their language in the emergency room, they might have to ask for a past narrative story and say, well, what happened to you? What did you swallow? Uh, so I think it's important for them to understand that the level of language you have is going to open different doors, and they're all valid. And it also means that what it you don't it's not an all or nothing, that just because you don't know everything doesn't mean you don't have a valid opportunity to use the language skills that you have.
And that vision of being able to continue to grow and improve, and through external to be provided evidence of your growth. There's an upcoming event in December that is designed to encourage and engage students and educators, correct? Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I'm very excited to tell you about that. So, global cred, thinking about street cred, you've got credibility. Global cred is all about language learners. And so, we thought about how do we solve this problem of making the world aware of these young people and adults, even, but
Mhm.
that have language skills, that have language certifications, and how do we also provide support to learners who may want to level up on their own, or who may be struggling because they couldn't fit another language course into a tight academic schedule, but still like languages? How do they find opportunities to serve in an NGO or to go into a study abroad program? How do they find a university that has the language that they want to study? Maybe this language they really are curious about wasn't even offered at their high school. How do we help employers find and identify language learners and those with language skills that they might want to hire? And so we decided to put this all together into a virtual event that's global. And because we're matching, working with global time zones, because we're working with very different school schedules, we will have a combination of both live content, but also on demand content. So it's an event that December 2nd and 3rd that language educators can bring their language students to. And we're providing lesson plan for the language educators to share. Students will be able to go into roundtable sessions and hear their language that they're studying or curious about being spoken by other language learners. They'll be able to listen to the best language trainers that we have in the world talk about how to level up your language skills if you're working on your speaking or trying to improve your reading or your writing. We'll be having employers talk about what do you need to do and how do you put your resume together if you want to be hired by a bilingual company. We're even going to talk about how to connect to STEM pieces for educators, that how do you encourage and excite students more about how to use language learning in the workforce. And so we're putting together I told you I like to dream big, so I have a
Mhm.
dream team, and we're putting together some incredible presenters that have a passion for learners and for language, and we're matching them up with an opportunity to participate globally. No matter what your language is, no matter what your time zone is, to be able to have free access, just like the Global Seal as a certification is free, this event is a free event. And we've opened registration. In our first week of registration, we
Uh-huh.
have almost, I think we're already at 4 countries. So far, 4 or 5 countries have already signed on, different
Wonderful.
individuals.
Wonderful.
And I'm really excited. We've got, I think, 14 different languages represented as a first language so far. So that's also an exciting piece. It's a diverse experience, and I'm hoping teachers will be really excited, especially as December comes and they're a little tired. And this will
Mhm.
be an opportunity for their students to really get excited about what's available for them in the future if they continue their language learning.
Phenomenal. Sounds like such an exciting experience, Linda. I know that it's going to be wonderful for all the participants and presenters as well. When you turn to the folks that have been listening to this podcast, give us one last word. What would you do to invite our listeners, to encourage our listeners, to challenge our listeners? What do you want them to take away from what they've heard today?
I think if there's any message or mission or challenge, I would say if you see a problem, look for a way to fix it. If you see someone who has a need and you have an opportunity to kind of help them or uniquely find a way to support them, do it. Our world needs to be a connected space where we care for each other and we look out for each other. And some of us make a pathway for others to follow. Um, they'll make the pathway bigger, they'll make it better. But some of us have to go through the woods and, and maybe take a few brambles, but it's okay because when you look back, you will be amazed at what is coming after.
Phenomenal encouragement, advice, and exhortation, my friend. Thank you so much, Linda. You've described so many opportunities for so many people today and made it such an invitation for others to have that in mind as they turn to what they can do in the world. Thank you for sharing all of it.
Well, thank you for your invitation. And as always, it's such a joy to talk to you, Nora.
Likewise, Linda. Thank you again so much. And you take good care and good luck with all the things that you are doing.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed it, please share it with your friends, family, and colleagues. Let's continue the conversation. Be sure to check out my website, fluencyonline.com, to learn more about our guests and to check out the resources and information they've shared with us there. I have other ideas, resources, and opportunities there for you too. Again, thanks so much for listening, and until next time,